I'll what?
You will save the Daleks! Save the Daleks! Save the Daleks! Save the Daleks!
The mysterious Dalek Eternal. Nothing more than a historian.
I exist to ensure the eternal reign of the new Dalek Paradigm. All potential threats must be identified and exterminated.
Oh, you're the Ideas Dalek. Did you pick the colours? Surely you should be sky blue.
200 videos is quite a milestone, and while if I had uploaded regularly over the last 4 years it would have been a lot sooner, it's crazy to see that I've made it this far. So I thought, to celebrate, why not go back to essentially the beginning, the video that made this channel what it is today. Yeah, you don't count. The new Dalek Paradigm is the first history video I did, and also strangely the most viewed, and while I don't think that quality-wise it's the worst, it's certainly not the best. Having this be my most viewed video is great, but at the same time it doesn't really reflect what the content is like now. So, let's remake it. Show it some love, as many of you have. Despite the paradigm being one of the most controversial eras, in recent years it has seen some resurgence in popularity, leading to incredible projects like Victory of the Doctor, featuring Jacob Dudman as Dr. Mew. I'll let that sink in. But without further ado and deliberation, let's get right into it. During the last Great Time War, the Dalek time strategist noted that the nemesis of the Dalek race, the Doctor, was deeply connected with their history, mentioning the yet-to-be-formed paradigm as an example. Through the extrapolations of the Matrix, the Time War-era Time Lords also foresaw the establishment of a new Dalek paradigm, the unique casings of which were denoted as Type 9 in the Dalek Combat Training Manual. Having travelled back in time to the ruined city of Kalan on Skaro prior to the arrival of the paradigm, the 11th Doctor and Amy Pond curiously found the city littered with aged inactive Type 9 Dalek casings, which included that of the Emperor. The aftermath of the Time War left only small pockets of Dalek survivors, all of which were destroyed in confrontations with the Doctor. Following the 21st century Dalek invasion, a lone new Dalek Empire saucer of 3 Daleks, the last known Daleks in existence, fell through time and discovered the final surviving progenitor device. The progenitor, hailing from the Time War, contained pure Dalek DNA and the means to recreate the entire species. However, it refused to recognise them as Dalek, since they had been made from Davros's mutated Khalid cells. To activate it, they set a trap for the 11th Doctor during the Second World War, and gained his testimony, confirming them as Daleks. 5 new Daleks were created, with pure Dalek DNA and new colour-coded ranks: a strategist, blue; scientist, orange; eternal, yellow; drone, red; and supreme, white. These Daleks immediately exterminated their 3 predecessors for their impurity, which they willingly accepted. Forcing the Doctor to allow their escape using a hidden bomb within an android, they fled through a time corridor to build a new empire of their own. In their record of Dalek activity in linear history, the Time Lords indicated that the paradigm was based in the far future, following the pre-Time War Hand of Omega incident, which itself followed the 47th century Necros incident. As a result of the Time War significantly changing history, the new Daleks had little way to verify the Pathweb's data of the conflict, but decided that they had in effect won the Time War, with the Time Lords absent in the new universe. After reorganising themselves into a new Supreme Council, the Daleks made use of the weapon production facilities on Goth to build a new army, erecting space stations on the borders of their many enemies. Studying the old Dalek Empire's Robomen, the paradigm improved on the technology to create the Dalek puppets. The Anti-Dalek force became aware of the paradigm, investigating its origins and compiling information about the new Dalek variants. Under an ethos of Know Your Enemy, they distributed a pamphlet on the subject across the galaxy, for some reason. Following their escape, the Daleks discovered the lost Time Lord artifact, the Eye of Time, allowing them to alter time as they saw fit. They returned with it to Skaro, rebuilt their capital city of Kalan, appointed a new emperor, and began rebuilding their empire. In this new timeline, they killed every member of the human race. However, the 11th Doctor and Amy Pond undid these events, leaving Earth unconquered and Skaro completely abandoned. a Dalek Supreme led an attack on the SS Lucy Gray to recover the Daleks' lost time axis. The 11th Doctor defeated them by firing their ship into the sun. The Dalek ship managed to escape by making a random jump several hundred years into the past. They attempted to force the Doctor to fix their vessel by attaching his TARDIS, but he escaped and used his TARDIS to fling their ship into a black hole. A scientist Dalek sent an alien family plummeting through time and space to collect all of the time orbs. The scientist recruited many strategists and drones. It also recruited armies of Cybermen and Silurians as a distraction for the 11th Doctor. At the beginning of the 40th century, the Daleks began another war with humanity, which continued into the 41st century. The 11th Doctor and Amy encountered a group led by the chief strategist, who had been sent on a mission to find a Dalek mutant being experimented on to make them less aggressive creatures. The Daleks referred to this mutant as the Abomination. They attacked and destroyed Earth's top-secret space station, Station 7, and chased the survivors to the planet Strantana below. After slaughtering all resistance, they finally found the Abomination in a hidden base, but it escaped its container and disabled the base's reactor for safety measures. An explosion destroyed the base, the Daleks, the Abomination, and all the Dalek ships on the planet. The Doctor, Amy, and Jay, a Space Security Service officer, watched from a safe distance. The Dalek mission was a failure, but the war continued, as they had agents working in the service. Led by a new Dalek Emperor, the Daleks planned to remove Gallifrey from existence and become the new laws of time. They used a piece of the Eternity Clock to put a time lock around a large part of London in 2106. Once they perfected their time lock technology, they planned to use it to put temporal bubbles around other planets, making them unstoppable. The 11th Doctor and River Song infiltrated the Emperor's flagship and managed to take back the piece of the clock. Human historians indicated that, for the Daleks, this event followed the loss of the Eye of Time, but preceded the total event collapse incident, which the Doctor who pursued the Eternity Clock had already been through. The Daleks joined the Pandorica Alliance to imprison the 11th Doctor in the Pandorica in 102 CE to save the universe, leading to the total event collapse incident. As the Doctor was not responsible for the event as they thought, the Daleks, along with almost the entire universe, were destroyed, leaving only 2 stone Daleks, one of which hindered the Doctor and his companions' efforts to save the universe in 1996. Nevertheless, they were successful, and the whole of reality was restored. Searching for information on the Silence before going on to what he assumed was his death, the Doctor found a badly damaged Supreme Dalek and looked up information on the Silence and its databanks. At some point, a small contingent of Bronze Daleks was sent on a mission to travel through Earth's history and analyse how humans made war, so that weaknesses could be found and exploited in future conflicts. They called this the Dalek Project. The 11th Doctor encountered these Daleks in 1917 during the First World War, where he sent their ship crashing to the ground by ramming a plane into it. The remaining Daleks were destroyed by the combined armies of the war, who had formed a very brief alliance to defend themselves. The Daleks also remained underground for 100 years, before it was found and accidentally reactivated by a team of archaeologists. The 11th Doctor arrived in time to save them and connected the ship up to a power line, overloading the Daleks. He called this unfinished business. The Daleks were notable customers of information regarding the Doctor held by the Inforarium. When the 11th Doctor discovered the Daleks, as well as the Cybermen and Sontarans, had been purchasing this information, he infiltrated the Inforarium and memory-proofed their database using methods he learned from the Silence. The information sold was thus instantly forgotten. Historians who studied the Daleks once discovered a damaged Paradigm Supreme in a renegade Dalek base, wondering if this indicated that the Paradigm had interfered with earlier Dalek history. The new Dalek Paradigm discovered the Cradle of the Gods, and learned of its ability to create or destroy on a massive scale. To make use of the weapon, the Daleks exploited a huge galactic recession to create the 400 Sunlight Worlds, planets that served as homes to the billions of people affected by the recession. The planets were governed by the Dalek Foundation, with the planet Cardethia of the Earth Alliance acting as a head of state. While a generation of people believed the Daleks had created a welfare state, it was in fact a plan headed by the Dalek Time Controller and the Supreme Dalek to transform the 400 worlds into copies of Skaro. However, the Daleks were unable to activate the Cradle, and so they sent an anonymous hypercube to the Doctor's TARDIS, with the intention of manipulating him into activating the Cradle instead. The Doctor's investigations resulted in shock when he learned the Daleks were considered a force for good, and he was placed on trial while trying to convince the citizens of Cardethia that they were evil, which the Daleks had declared a hate crime. He was put on trial by the Dalek litigator, who was really the time controller posing as a law enforcer, and when he pleaded guilty in a failed attempt to anger the Dalek and was sentenced to imprisonment, he escaped off-planet with 3 orphan children, Sable, Genebeth, and Olus Blakely, whose parents, Terran and Alice, had killed themselves to prevent the Daleks from obtaining the information on the cradle that they possessed. After learning more about the cradle on the desert planet of Darinthia and losing Genebeth, the Doctor failed to spark a revolution on Sunlight 349 to cause the collapse of the Dalek Foundation. The Dalek litigator arrived and subjected the Doctor to another public trial. Sable and Olus were taken away from the Doctor's care, and he was exiled from the Sunlight Worlds. However, he returned to Darinthia 90 years in the future, coming across an elderly Genebeth who had been transformed into a Dalek puppet after the Daleks took her prisoner as a child. The Dalek litigator arrived and revealed its true form to the Doctor, before forcing him to activate the cradle. However, Genebeth's childlike mind allowed her to resist her conditioning, and she fired on the Daleks, destroying numerous drones and forcing the time controller to retreat. The Doctor set the cradle to self-destruct, but before it exploded, it reverted the Sunlight Worlds to how Genebeth remembered them as a child, as well as turning her and her siblings back into children and recreating their parents with reverted memories. While the Daleks abandoned the plan, the ultimate fate of the Sunlight Worlds remained unknown. Their manipulation of the Doctor, however, caused him to realise how much of a danger he could potentially be, leading him to enter a short-lived retirement from travelling in Victorian London. Human historians place the Dalek Foundation as the last of a string of Dalek defeats, which led to the establishment of the Parliament of the Daleks and the fall of the Paradigm's power. After being ruled by 2 failed Dalek emperors, a Parliament of the Daleks was formed, led by the Prime Minister. This reorganisation was motivated by the many defeats that the Doctor inflicted onto them. The Prime Minister also promoted the Red Drones to an officer class in the Dalek Imperial Army, while returning the standard Dalek drone to the bronze design used in the Time War, the design most likely to invoke fear across the cosmos. Members of the Paradigm were reduced to a token presence, as the empire they had established was beginning to reject them. Thus marked the beginning of the resurrected Dalek Empire, but still with elements of the Paradigm. When the human starliner the Alaska crash-landed on the Dalek Asylum planet, the security containing the insane Daleks was compromised. Fearing what would happen if these Daleks were to escape, the Prime Minister ordered the abduction of the Doctor, whom he called the Predator of the Daleks. He would be sent to the Asylum to lower its force field so the Daleks could destroy their deranged brethren, despite their wish to preserve them and their beautiful hatred. Understanding that the Doctor was best assisted by his companions, his most recent ones, Amy Pond and Rory Williams, were abducted as well. Once the planet's defences were lowered by the human-turned-Dalek, Oswin Oswald, the Parliament launched an attack to destroy the Asylum, but not before Oswin had wiped out all memory of the Doctor in the minds of every Dalek. When he returned to their ship, he was bombarded with the question by the entire Parliament. This sudden gap in the Daleks' knowledge brought confusion and doubt to the Empire, stalling their war efforts as they attempted to discover the identity of the enemy who had foiled them so many times in the past. The Eternal developed a theory of an unknown predator of the Daleks. After encountering the Yearn, the Daleks learnt it had encountered a surviving Time Lord on Medruth. Having believed them to be extinct since forgetting the Doctor, the Supreme Strategist and Eternal led an invasion of Medruth to draw the survivor back, and learn if any more Time Lords survived. The plan succeeded, bringing the 11th Doctor and Valarie Lockwood to the planet. He was captured and interrogated by the scientist, which connected him to the pathweb to sublimate his mind to raw data. The Doctor's mental defences prevented this, however, and instead he made contact with the Yearn and bargained with it to take over the pathweb and halt the Daleks so as to enable a refugee ship to escape Medruth. The Daleks quickly reasserted their identities, regaining control in time to destroy the fleeing ship, though the Doctor had escaped. The Supreme reported back to the Prime Minister, who deemed the incident proof the Daleks had nothing to fear from the survivor, and ordered a new offensive on the universe to begin. They began a systematic conquest, including sending a scout ship to Darinthia. However, the Doctor broadcast to the Supreme that he was the predator of the Daleks that they feared, and that he was back. With the aid of Valarie and Rowana, the Doctor connected the Archeon device to the pathweb and moved all the Daleks into its pocket universe. To prevent the Daleks deducing their new reality long enough to be emotionally drained, the trio placed the Paradigm leadership in specific scenarios. The Doctor placed the Eternal in a time loop fighting constructs of time spiders to prove to it what eternity truly meant. Valarie tormented the scientist by disarming it and dismantling it, while Rowana trapped the strategist and Supreme in a room with a construct of herself which they couldn't fire on for fear of triggering the Surge mutation. The Eternals succumbed to the loop, whilst the Supreme exterminated the strategist as it began to give in to the emotional drain. The scientist used its last moments to deduce the truth of the Archean device, enabling the Supreme to take control from the Doctor and try to enable invasions across the universe. Unknown to the Daleks, the Doctor had anticipated this, and allowed them to conquer the universe, as it was actually a construct of the Archean device. Once the Daleks had conquered the entire fake universe, he allowed the Parliament to capture him whilst Valarie and Rowana infected the device with the Darinthian blight. As the Daleks controlled all currency in the device's universe, the blight killed all the Daleks, including the Supreme. The Doctor suspected, however, that some Daleks would have survived. The Daleks, along with Cybermen, Santarans, Slitheen, Pteroleptils, Silurians, Jadoon, Weeping Angels, and many other species, were driven to Trenzalore by a mysterious message. The Daleks had previously attempted to decipher the message remotely, but it proved to be impossible. After the Doctor and Clara Oswald deciphered the message with a Time Lord seal, the Dalek Supreme recognised it as the question asked by the Time Lords through a crack in the universe, with the answer being the Doctor's true name. If it was answered, the Time Lords would return, and the waiting fleets would fire on them, beginning another time war. To avert this, the Papal mainframe, who had arrived at the planet first, set up a force field locking off the planet, beginning the siege of Trenzalore. While the other species attempted to sneak past the force field, the Daleks called for reinforcements, preparing for war. Eventually, they attacked the mainframe itself, killing everyone before converting them into Dalek puppets. Information regarding the Doctor was harvested from Tasha Lem, resulting in the Daleks remembering who he was. The sudden remembrance of their foe drove the Dalek Prime Minister mad. Deeming him unfit for duty, the Supreme exterminated it and resumed control of the Empire. The Daleks arranged for the Doctor to be lured into a trap, but Tasha managed to break free from her conditioning and destroy the Daleks sent to kill the Doctor. Despite the trap failing, the Daleks managed to breach the force field, and the siege of Trenzalore grew into a war as the species orbiting the planet followed the Daleks through the force field. After 5 centuries of fighting, many of the other species were either killed off or retreating, leaving only the Daleks left. The Doctor and the mainframe's silent priests acted as the last line of defense against the Daleks, but they too were overpowered. The Doctor, having used up all 12 of his regenerations, grew too old to continue fighting. With the resistance dealt with, the Daleks began looking for the Doctor in the town of Christmas, with Dalek attack ships firing on the town and the Parliament saucer descending upon it. However, Clara Oswald successfully pleaded to the Time Lords to save the Doctor, who began regenerating into his 12th incarnation. The energy released was enough to destroy some of the attacking fighter pods, and the final burst destroyed the Parliament. The shockwave blew apart the Dalek ground forces, ending the war. Human historians believed that, having committed all their might to ensuring the Time Lords would never return, the Daleks had been utterly wiped out at Trenzalore. Still, given the Daleks' many other final defeats, they were not entirely convinced, particularly as Skaro still existed and was known to inhabit a number of Daleks. Skaro still existed in that state as the centre of the post-Time War Dalek Empire. However, on Skaro and throughout the Empire as the Daleks carried on their conquests, the original Paradigm casings that had once been so prominent, only to be reduced, appeared to vanish altogether, with many other Dalek casings, most prominently bronze casings, seeing use instead. Indeed, some human historians noted that the Paradigm Daleks eventually vanished from the Dalek Empire altogether. According to these historians, the Paradigm had only been ostensibly pure. These historians listed the Paradigm as an example of the Dalek variants who, despite persisting for some time, were ultimately destroyed by the Greater Empire for not being truly pure. They also claimed the Paradigm's appearance had been mocked by other civilizations, which they said contributed to their removal from sight amongst the Empire. In one of the psychoscapes, based on various eras of Dalek history, which existed within the Dalek Dome on 2323 Earth, was a Dalek Empire ruled by a white Supreme Dalek. As overseen by the 14th Doctor, the new Dalek Paradigm were part of the Dalek Alliance, which invaded the Golden City of Zeon during the 2323 Dalek invasion of Earth. Working with the Reborn Master, the Dalek Time Controller created an alternate timeline where it took over Earth from Paris in 1921. By 1961, the planet was New Skaro, and converted the biomatter of humans, Santarans, Draconians, and other aliens into a new Dalek paradigm. In the original course of events on Darinthia, following the Dalek invasion of Medruth, the 11th Doctor attempted his plan to connect the pathweb to the Archean device alone, and was captured in doing so. The Daleks landed in force on Darinthia to seek his companions, and exterminated Rowana. The Eternal subjected the Doctor to an interrogation, after which he was transported to the Parliament to be exterminated. These events were averted when Valarie travelled back in time prior to the Doctor instigating his plan, leading to him not doing it alone. And that is the story of the new Dalek Paradigm. Quite a lot has happened to them since our first entry, surprisingly almost double the amount. As said in the beginning, they are perhaps the most underappreciated of all Dalek variants, particularly by their own. The thing is with Dalek purity is that the definition is only consistent in one regard. It keeps changing time and time again. The Renegade Imperial Civil War fought over purity. The Great Civil War on Skaro fought over purity. The Paradigm were meant to be the most pure of all Daleks, yet that very fact did not save them from being cast out. But anyway guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this updated entry, then consider leaving a like and subscribing down below, as it really helps out the channel. 200 by no means marks the end. We've got plenty more coming. But, as always, thanks for watching.